The winter wind carried snowflakes across the Montana plains like scattered prayers. Sarah Mitchell pressed her gloved hands against the frost-covered window of the stagecoach, watching the endless white landscape roll by. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched the worn letter in her lap. 3 months ago, she had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride. 3 months ago, her life in Boston had crumbled around her when the textile mill closed and her small savings disappeared with her landlord's sudden departure. Now, as the coach lurched over another frozen rut, Sarah wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The letter from Thomas Hartwell promised a good home, steady work, and perhaps in time, a loving marriage. She had written back carefully, honestly describing herself as a 26-year-old woman with brown hair, practical skills, and a gentle nature. He had seemed pleased with her response and had sent money for the journey west. The stagecoach driver's voice cut through her thoughts. "Walker Ranch up ahead, miss. This your stop." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Walker Ranch? No, I'm looking for the Hartwell place." The driver scratched his graying beard. "Hartwell Place is another 10 miles east, but this here storm's getting worse. Roads might not be passable much longer. Walker Ranch is good people though. They'll put you up for the night if needed." Before Sarah could protest, the coach was already turning down a snow-packed lane. Through the swirling snow, she could see the warm glow of windows in a large log house. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising heat and shelter from the bitter cold. The coach came to a stop, and Sarah gathered her carpetbag and small trunk. As she stepped down into the deep snow, the front door of the house opened. A tall man emerged, silhouetted against the golden light from within. He wore simple work clothes and moved with the careful grace of someone accustomed to hard physical labor. "Evening," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the snow. "I'm James Walker. Looks like you folks could use some shelter." The stagecoach driver tipped his hat. "Much obliged, Mr. Walker. This lady here was meant for the Hartwell place, but with this storm." "Of course," James said, stepping forward. "Ma'am, you're welcome to stay until the weather clears. It's not safe to travel in this." Sarah found herself looking into kind blue eyes that seemed to hold depths of both strength and sorrow. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said softly. "I don't want to impose." "No imposition at all," James replied. "Let me help you with your things." As the stagecoach pulled away, disappearing into the white veil of snow, Sarah felt a moment of panic. Here she was, stranded at a stranger's ranch with a storm raging around them. But something in James Walker's manner put her at ease. There was a gentleness there, a quiet respectability that made her feel safe. James led her toward the house, carrying her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "I should warn you," he said as they reached the front porch, "I have a daughter. She's 7 years old. Her mother passed 2 years ago, and she doesn't see many visitors, especially women." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened again. A small figure appeared, pressing close to James's side. The little girl had dark hair like her father and wore a simple blue dress. Her eyes were large and solemn as she studied Sarah with the intense curiosity of childhood. "Lucy," James said gently, "this is Miss Sarah. She's going to stay with us tonight because of the storm." Lucy continued to stare at Sarah for a long moment. Then, to Sarah's surprise, the child's face broke into a radiant smile. She tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered something Sarah couldn't quite hear. James's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his features. "Lucy, why don't you help Miss Sarah get settled by the fire while I put her things away?" Inside the house, Sarah found herself in a comfortable main room. The walls were log, chinked tight against the cold. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across handmade furniture and colorful quilts. Everything spoke of a home built with care and maintained with love. Lucy approached Sarah shyly, then took her hand with surprising confidence. "You can sit here," she said, leading Sarah to a chair near the fire. "It's the warmest spot." As Sarah settled into the chair, she noticed how the little girl stayed close, as if afraid Sarah might disappear. "Thank you, Lucy. That's very thoughtful. Are you really staying?" Lucy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just for tonight, sweetheart. Until the storm passes." Lucy's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Papa says storms don't last forever." James returned, brushing snow from his shoulders. "I've put your things in the spare room upstairs. It's small, but it's warm and clean. You're very kind, Sarah said. I hope I'm not putting you out. Not at all. James moved to tend the fire, adding another log. Supper will be ready soon. Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits. As if summoned by the mention of food, wonderful smells began drifting from what Sarah assumed was the kitchen. Her stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten since dawn. Can I help with anything? Sarah offered. I've got it handled, James replied. You just rest. Travel can be tiring. But Lucy had other ideas. Miss Sarah, would you like to see my room? And my doll. Papa made her for me. Sarah looked to James, who nodded encouragingly. Go ahead. Lucy doesn't often have someone to show her treasures to. Lucy's room was small but cozy, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt and a small rocking chair by the window. The doll her father had made was indeed beautiful, carved from wood and dressed in a tiny blue dress that matched Lucy's own. She's lovely, Sarah said, examining the doll carefully. Your father is very talented. He made everything, Lucy said proudly. The bed, the chair, even the house. Mama used to say he had magic hands. Sarah heard the wistfulness in the child's voice and felt her heart squeeze. Your mama sounds like she was very special. Lucy nodded solemnly. She got sick. Papa tried to help her, but she had to go to heaven. The little girl was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Sarah with those large, serious eyes. But she told me before she left that God would send someone to take care of us when we needed it most. Before Sarah could respond, James called from downstairs that supper was ready. As they made their way to the kitchen, Sarah found herself thinking about Lucy's words. The child had an old soul, the kind that comes from experiencing loss too early. Supper was indeed simple but delicious. James had made a hearty beef stew with vegetables from what Sarah assumed was a root cellar, and the biscuits were light and fluffy. As they ate, Lucy chattered happily about her daily routines, her lessons with her father, and the animals on the ranch. We have horses and cattle, she told Sarah importantly. And chickens. I collect the eggs every morning. The chickens know me, so they don't peck. Sarah found herself relaxing in the warm kitchen, drawn into the easy rhythm of this small family's life. James was a good father, patient with Lucy's endless questions and stories. He included Sarah naturally in their conversation, asking about her journey and her life in Boston. What brings you west? He asked as they finished. The meal. Sarah hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm to be married. To a man named Thomas Hartwell. We've corresponded, but we've never met. Something flickered in James's eyes, but he only nodded. The Hartwell place is a good spread. Thomas is a decent man. There was something in his tone that made Sarah look at him more closely, but before she could ask, Lucy had climbed down from her chair. Miss Sarah, will you read to me? Papa reads to me every night, but sometimes his voice gets tired. Sarah glanced at James, who nodded. I'd be happy to. They moved back to the main room, where Lucy produced a worn book of fairy tales. Sarah settled in the chair by the fire with Lucy curled up beside her, and began to read. The little girl listened intently, occasionally asking questions or commenting on the story. As Sarah read, she became aware of James moving quietly around the room, banking the fire and preparing the house for the night. There was something deeply peaceful about the scene, something that spoke to a longing she hadn't realized she carried. When Lucy's eyes began to droop, James gently scooped her up. Time for bed, little one. Will Miss Sarah still be here in the morning? Lucy asked sleepily. If the storm has passed, she'll need to continue her journey, James said carefully. Lucy's arms tightened around her father's neck. But what if God sent her to us? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at the child's words. James met her eyes over Lucy's head, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. We'll see what the morning brings, he said softly. After James had taken Lucy upstairs, Sarah sat alone by the dying fire. The storm continued to rage outside, wind howling around the corners of the house. But inside, all was warm and peaceful. She found herself thinking about the Hartwell ranch, about the man she was supposed to marry. Their letters had been cordial, practical. He needed a wife to help run his household. She needed security and a home. It was a reasonable arrangement. But sitting in this cozy room, having shared a simple meal with James and Lucy, Sarah realized she had tasted something different. Something that felt like belonging. When James returned downstairs, he found her still sitting by the fire. Can I get you anything? More tea? Another blanket. No, thank you. I was just thinking. Sarah looked up at him, taking in his kind face and gentle manner. Lucy is a wonderful child. She is. Sometimes I worry I'm not enough for her. A little girl needs. He trailed off, then shook his head. I'm sorry. That's not your concern. She seems happy, Sarah said carefully. And she clearly adores you. James settled into the chair across from her. Can I ask you something? About your arrangement with Thomas Hartwell. Sarah nodded, curious about his hesitant tone. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah considered lying, considered giving the expected answer about how love would grow in time. Instead, she found herself being honest. No, I don't even know him, really. We've exchanged letters, but... She paused, then continued. I needed somewhere to go, and he needed a wife. It seemed practical. James was quiet for a long moment. Lucy's mother and we married for love. When she died, I thought that was the end of that kind of happiness for me. But tonight, watching you with Lucy, seeing how you fit into our evening. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I have no right to say these things. You have obligations. Sarah's heart was pounding. What if I didn't? Their eyes met across the flickering firelight. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes life takes us where we need to be, not where we plan to go. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Lucy said something tonight about God sending someone when you need them most. Before James could respond, a small voice came from the stairs. Miss Sarah. Papa. They turned to see Lucy on the steps, clutching her wooden doll. I had a bad dream. The wind sounds scary. James stood immediately. Come here, sweetheart. But Lucy ran to Sarah instead, climbing into her lap with the trusting abandon of childhood. Will you stay until the scary sounds stop? Sarah wrapped her arms around the little girl, feeling how perfectly she fit there. Over Lucy's head, she met James's eyes again. I'll stay as long as you need me to, she said, and knew she wasn't just talking about the storm. The morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Sarah woke to the sound of voices downstairs and the smell of coffee and bacon. When she came down, she found James making breakfast while Lucy set the table with careful precision. Good morning, James said, turning from the stove. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you. Sarah felt suddenly shy in the morning light, wondering if the previous evening's conversation had been real or just a product of firelight and storm-induced intimacy. But when Lucy ran to hug her, chattering excitedly about the snow and how it looked like diamond dust in the sunlight, Sarah knew her feelings hadn't changed. After breakfast, James hitched up his sleigh. I should take you to the Hartwell place, he said, though his tone suggested it was the last thing he wanted to do. The ride across the snow-covered landscape was beautiful but tense. Lucy sat between them, bundling herself close to Sarah and pointing out landmarks along the way. As they drew closer to their destination, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. The Hartwell ranch was larger than James's place, more prosperous looking. But somehow it felt cold to Sarah, despite the smoke rising from its chimneys. Thomas Hartwell came out to meet them. He was a man in his 40s, well-dressed and businesslike. He greeted Sarah politely but without warmth, and barely acknowledged James and Lucy. Miss Mitchell, I trust your journey wasn't too difficult. I expected you yesterday. The storm delayed her, James said quietly. She stayed at my place for safety. Hartwell nodded curtly. Well, you're here now. We can proceed with the arrangements. As Sarah climbed down from the sleigh, Lucy suddenly grabbed her hand. Miss Sarah, she whispered urgently, you don't have to go. God sent you to us, remember? I prayed about it all night, and I know it's true. Sarah knelt down to the little girl's level, her heart breaking. Lucy, please, the child whispered, tears starting in her eyes. We need you. Papa needs you, even if he's too scared to say it. Sarah looked over at James, who was watching them with an expression of longing and resignation. Then she looked at Thomas Hartwell, who was waiting impatiently on his porch. In that moment, Sarah realized that Lucy was right. Sometimes God does send people exactly where they need to be. She stood up slowly, her decision made. Mr. Hartwell, she called out, I'm very sorry, but I've changed my mind. The man's face darkened. What do you mean, changed your mind? We have an agreement. I'll repay your expenses for my travel, Sarah said firmly. But I won't be staying. She turned to James, whose eyes had gone wide with hope. That is, if you'll have me. Both of you. Lucy let out a squeal of joy and threw herself into Sarah's arms. Over the child's head, Sarah saw James's face transform with a smile that lit up his entire being. Are you sure? He asked softly. It won't be an easy life. The ranch is small, the winters are hard. I'm sure, Sarah said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Sometimes the wrong road leads us exactly where we're meant to be. As they drove back toward the Walker Ranch through the sparkling snow, Lucy chattering excitedly about all the things she wanted to show Sarah, James reached over and took her hand. Thank you, he said quietly. Sarah squeezed his hand in return. Thank you for giving me a home. God sent you to us, Lucy piped up from between them. I knew he would. And looking at the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above them, Sarah had to agree. She had been sent to the wrong ranch, but somehow, miraculously, it had turned out to be exactly the right place after all.